Good evening. This is Jason. This is my second homework upload, um, November 25th. Lessons learned from foundation concept analysis theories on global economy and competitiveness. Topics that I would like to discuss is inflation, globalization and deglobalization, capital FDI impact, and what lessons learned, concept of currency of last resort. Um, Drivers of innovation, creation to drive productivity improvement, concept of adding value. AI, can it really improve product efficiency? War and economic aids to foreign country and FDI, where the local tax does not go back to where it is collected. Tariffs, China and USA relations. You can see from the inflation there everywhere in the world right now, inflation's been very high and concerning. In 2020 to 2022, Russia, Argentina, Brazil being the most impacted, and Turkey. Russia, obviously, due to the war impact, and the European nations are higher, higher. Like, can I, um, I try to go back to that slide. It was really skipped quickly, but it was also inflation about the four types of inflation that driven by cost because of the raw material or process cost increase, or the demand has increased, but the supply remained the same. Monetary policy, where printing of the money is increased, so that the value of the currency has decreased. Um, and the prolonged inflation, where the inflation happened due to some special event like COVID-19, but it doesn't go away after that special event has been over. So the recent uh, inflation has a lot to do with the global housing crisis. It started in 2008, and the government put more money into the system, and long period of low interest rates, trying to fuel the economic growth. But the debt has also continued to increase, and more stimulus due to COVID-19 and war, Ukraine war, and energy and food supply had been reduced, as Russia is a major exporter of uh, energy, and Ukraine is a major exporter of wheat. That kind of continue to drive the inflation um, globally. Globalization, we cannot argue, no one can argue the benefit it had bringing world economy growth, and 1.3 billion people, largely in China, out of extreme poverty. And it also increases the innovation, as the scale, it brings a scale that is required for innovation to grow. Um, and the more competition also drives the innovation. Negative is, I believe, it creates global bubbles. So when the bubble happens, it doesn't just can be contained within the one nation, but it will spread to all nation. So that's a very big risk, and everything is linked, and it can trigger and spread to others. And in times of where sacrifices need to made, it's difficult to get the buy-in, because no one nation wants to sacrifice more than the other nation. Um, and it reduces the national sovereignty and identity control. Like the UK wanted to control and limit some policy regarding immigration, but the EU voted against it, whole EU. So maybe led to that may have led to Brexit, and the international crime, a wide risk of disease, and wider risk spread of inequality. Uh, some countries left behind, and some population left behind of this globalization. Challenges, lack of regulation in global finance. Global finance continues to lag in meaningful way of standardizing like the other industry. Finance largely being isolated or worked separately. You can see from this graph where economy grew through globalization. Both U.S. and both China has grown. It's not just China benefited from globalization, but also U.S. And it was China was to forecast to surpass U.S. in GDP, but our current situation with China, highly doubt that they will surpass U.S. as the largest economy in the world. This chart from 1440 to now shows a different invention and innovation impact to the growth. There is X-ray, tanks, nuclear fission, email, ATM, World Wide Web, Internet, Bitcoin, ATM. So this just graph is showing how innovation can drive the continued growth of economy. There are time period of World War One and World War Two where globalization stopped. Can show the flat line of the economy growth. And in the beginning part where all nations were independent, the transportation method and the communication method that won't allow globalization, how the economy, world economy was pretty much flat. Risk, I think biggest risk, one of the biggest risk, I think, is a currency devaluation or currency attack. IMF happened in 90s, and also Britain sterling crisis happened in 1992. I think the currency can be under attack where uh, like the Britain sterling crisis on was reducing in the agreed level of European nation. Um, but so the government wanted to prop up the currency, but the famous investor Soros had a large amount of short position on the sterling and continued to attack and short sell, and eventually a British pound devalue, and the government wasn't able to support the level that they agreed on with European Union called ERM. So that made a currency crisis, and the economy suffered, had a big impact on economy, and IMF as well. Korean currency was devalued overnight about 100%. So um, that destabilized their local economy and took a long time for them to get out. So the global trade, global market brings this kind of open to this kind of attack. Um, Depreciation makes export more competitive without any effort in long term. This may reduce incentive for firm to cut costs and could lead to declining productivity and rising prices. Nations to turmoil, to breaking down key issues that may cause the globalization risk. Here is the globalization. Kind of what I want to say is market is full. I think a long periods of globalization and growth with all the events that are happening, we grew a lot, and supply and demand curve shows there is no there is a limit to the supply and limit to the demand, especially when um, demographics or the population is decreasing and demographic is aging. And without some shift in the demand and shift in the supply, I don't think that the market uh, is um, market is limited, or market is going closer to saturated is a word. So when global market becomes saturated with globalization, growth rate will inevitably slow. as less and less our untapped market is available. China was a big market that was untapped and now is becoming saturated. Um, there is no other new market like China, so globalization has to uh, slow down as market be saturation. Now I just want to talk a little bit about solo model. It's a uh, it's a model after all the different models that we learned in this course. Um, I think the solo model talk about ideas other along with the diamond Porter model that I believe is very true. Very that I agree most. And the solo growth model is a exogenous model of economic growth that analyzes changes in the level of output in the economy over time as a result, changes in population growth rate, saving rate, and rate of technology. So um, this is the solo model graph, capital per worker. This bottom here, capital per worker, horizontal axis, and vertical axis cap output per worker. So as the capital, this is the capital part, capital increases, there is a depreciation happening. So the output will be the depreciation and the capital, and you add that together, you get the output. But in as the increase in the capital, incremental benefit of the output diminishes and it slows down. Because of the depreciation, there's an equilibrium point where the depreciation equals the investment of the capital. Beyond that, the more investment just will mean more depreciation and it takes away from the output. So I think this describes what I feel about the globalization in a sense that you can invest in the different countries, like in China in the earlier time when the capital investment need to be a lot and foreign investment was tremendous. But I think recently the FDI has decreased. You can say is due to government relations, but I also believe that where China is maybe closer to this point, and that is inevitable. The investment will decrease because of depreciation, and it will be higher, and output per worker will decrease, or kind of even out. So there is not much return that you can gain more by investing more. Um, the human capital, this is the education factor. I believe this part, I talked about it in the first homework, how education is one of the foundation. Solo model shows that education is human capital is a plus, a factor to output per worker. And but one point that I don't agree is the population growth is a minus impact to the GDP. Um, there's something maybe I want to analyze or look into more research, more detail, whether population growth is good or is bad. I think it can be debated. Saving and investment, the capital, I think this is definitely good impact to the GDP, positive impact to the GDP. And education is a good impact to the GDP. But because education drives ideas and technology. But I just one thing about savings and investment, if you save and you invest back into your own market, I think yes. But savings and investment as an FDI or government spending on war, you're taking this capital away from your local market and then you're putting it into other countries, especially for war. It's a destructive, not constructive, and uh, it's a GDP destroyer. So you're using the investment saving on the I believe, on the things that is the destruction of the GDP. So I think this is why Ukraine war and war on Israel, war around the world, uh, uh, any war in Africa or between the nations or even warlords, I think is very, very destructive and to economy and GDP, and waste of human resources, human capital, savings, investment capital, and uh, so the that's that I want to say is very, very critical in my mind of how to grow the nation's competitiveness. Deglobalization. Um, what is the period of deglobalizing after long years of globalization since 1990s? So why is the deglobalization trend is happening? Politics, national security, climate change, and health, COVID. Um, and the result is weakening confidence of foreign investment. And what is the positive thing and negative thing to the world, and what is going to happen? What is the impact? Now, drivers of deglobalization is a difference in politics in nation and their sovereignty and their key ideas and priority. So I think this is the driver of the deglobalization, um, and control of the communication, such as a Great Firewall of China censorship, I think added the speed of the deglobalization. Climate change, this is constantly on the forefront. If less activity and the less travel, the carbon footprint, I think this is all driving factors of deglobalization. And it's kind of a history, as this graph shows, the cycles of deglobalization. World trade peaked before World War II. After World War II, deglobalization happened until World War II ends, and then globalization picked up again, and then is on the downward trend. I don't know if it's going to be short term and goes back up, or it's going to be a long term, something like that happened in World War II under deglobalization. Um, Remains to be seen. Benefits of deglobalization: reduce monopoly, and it protects local business and the health and safety control. And I think also another thing can point out is the crime, international crime can be more controlled. And also the currency your own currency can be protected, can be more stable. A negative impact: human rights and erosion of treaty, coordinate against global threats. I think just more like peace. When you have globalization, people are more connected and interests are more aligned, so that I think more of these excuse me, more of these issues can be talked and honored. But without globalization, I think this can be a risk. Arms control, coordinated defense will be suffer. Controlling climate, global initiative, and nuclear arms control like this, it will be difficult to do. It will reduce the natural competitiveness, inflation, price will increase, lack of supply, uh, reduce market, so lead to lower economic growth and lead to lower innovation. Fleeing of FDI, such as war, will increase the financial risk. Investment will be reduced and be more conservative. And Brazil and Argentina had closed economy, and economy was stagnant for 40 years, so slower growth of economy. And China economy did not grow until they adopt to open economy. So there is a plenty of evidence to show that the globalization negative impact will be slowed down from the growth of the economy. Decoupling. This is just I wanted to talk just show decoupling between China and US. A historical cycle shows the first wave of globalization between wars, second wave of globalization, and the third wave of globalization. There was no decoupling, but now maybe it's happening. It's the same graph that I showed in the previous chart. Um, since Adam Smith, globalization and increase of trade is good, heightened competition, faster efficiency, and specialization and scale. Um, but globalization was bound to slow due to saturation of the market, and global trade has growth, trade volume growth, but it have been decreasing since 2006 and never recovered to pre uh, financial crisis in 2008. So I believe what decoupling is happening with China and US, or I know it's happening with China and US. So even though there's all these benefits, decoupling can happen because, like I mentioned earlier about the market saturation, is already as it stands, the market is very much saturated, and the growth according to Solo model, uh, is leveling off. And I think so. I put this pyramid here. National and security interest is the bottom. Foundation, economic growth, and social stability on the top. So these are the three things that I think nations uh, look at. And right now, national security and interest and social stability is out trumping the economic growth. And economic growth also is, I believe anyway, globalization is under cooling period and market is saturated. So I think nation has less to lose by decoupling. Now, talking about the tariffs, tariffs impact to nation. Uh, Very good example is a smooth Harley tariff, which happened in U.S. and this is a tariff on U.S. tariff to recover the U.S. economy in 1930s. However, this caused several other countries to impose a retaliatory tariff and trade plummet between the countries. And total 890 items were tariffed. For example, 12 million eggs per year to Canada were exported at that time in U.S. But after tariff reduced, 99% of the automobile still um, and was the automobile and steel was down by 80%. So and the lower economic trade increases risk of war. This is what happened. The tariff definitely can trigger the tariff war to other nation and increase inflation. And in this case, for US, it increased or it started the depression. So that's the impact. Could worst case impact to tariff. Um, I think that right now, if Trump talking about more tariffs coming on China and so on, this could be one of the real risk tariff can have on the nation. One is the country could uh, trade could decrease and the economic growth would decrease and it can hit recession or depression and also by putting on tariffs the price of the goods will increase. Now I show this chart, these two charts to show that what's the difference between uh, 1820 to recent what goods that U.S. exports, because if there's a tariff, there will be a retaliatory tariff against U.S. and the U.S. export will be hit with it. And you can see from this chart, the blue is the crude material and crude foodstuff, and the red and orange colors are manufacturing stuff. Uh, in the past, more crude material, crude foodstuffs were exported, and recently more and more manufactured stuff and finished manufactured stuffs were being exported from United States. And U.S. trade balance shows that in 1700 it was zero, and the trade balance started being minus starting 1996 and so on. So as the globalization happened, U.S. trade balance is very much negative, which means um, U.S. U.S. export much less than import. So my point I was trying to make here is that in 1930s uh, it might be an even war, tariff war. There's an equal amount of export and imports, and U.S. will suffer equally. However, now U.S. is exporting a lot less than importing. In this case, the game of tariff favors U.S. because U.S. Will be much less impacted by the tariff because they export less. And if they don't export because of the tariffs, actually the trade balance will be more to zero. So I would, in this case, US would benefit. Now, in the China case, China recently big trouble with the property market, and there was a property market bubble, and they have not been able to recover. So confidence is low, leads to less spending, and there's high debt in commercial and state level. So Chinese economy is still growing at 5%, but most of the growth is coming from federal government spending on construction and local business. And big issue is reducing in foreign investment and outflow of capital. So foreign investment is less, capital is less. So according to Solo model, the growth will be impacted. So more and more government spending, it will create inflationary pressure, but people are spending less and less, and this economy model is not sustainable. So here is a U.S. and China trade balance. You're showing from 2016 through 2019. So balance is minus export to uh, export US is a blue and import is red, and the balance is negative for US. So you can see the trade has total trade has been continuing to decrease in recent years due to tariffs that are already imposed and the decoupling is happening. Um, but and the I think that's also one of the reasons fueling the inflation in US due to less supply. Uh, However, continue going forward, that if the U.S. can locally build the things and increase back the supply, um, it might be that inflation can be controlled. Um, this chart just showing different trade, uh, like imports. What is U.S. importing from China? What kind of things they're importing, like cell phone, computers, computer accessory, toys and games, apparel, telecommunications and furniture, apparels, clothes and things like that. These are the top stuff that U.S. is importing from China. And which product does America export to China is aerospace product parts, oil seed, grains, motor vehicle, semiconductor, others, electronic, oil and gas. So if I look at like this in a way, is that aerospace products, even though China must have it, and only two nations can provide U.S. Is a critical parts airline industry of U.S. and only France, and all the fleets in the China have U.S. planes and French planes. So these parts will be very little impacted because all of the fleets that they already bought for U.S. as a Boeing, they need these parts. No matter it's against their own. You kill their own company by increasing the cost through tariff on these aerospace parts. So far, right now, China do not have real or technology to build planes, so passenger planes. So and then the grains and the food stuff, and this is very, very little impact, I believe. If grain and food stuff doesn't go to China, but it goes to U.S. market, then I think the price of food and the oil or things like that will come down actually in U.S. And the motor vehicles, very, very little imported. China is already dominating more and more motor vehicle cars. There's a very less imports. And then semiconductor is also critical for China. And so until China build their own industry technology, this is a critical component for their building their export, which is computer, laptop, cell phone, and so on. So I think it's very, very little to a little risk of retaliatory tariff from China to U.S. There's not much can be done. But in the other side, China imports, U.S. imports from China what China exports to U.S. These are the items that is daily being used. If these are taxed and tariffed, that China and is reduced from the China and is desourced from the China, and then it moved to other countries like Vietnam, India, or even Mexico, or to United States locally. This is China has a big risk of losing big part of their manufacturing base. And in 2019, U.S. imports from China dropped by 87 billion. So it was 551 billion in 2022. That's a big chunk of reduction, and every year has been decreasing. And you can see the imports from Vietnam has picked up, and Vietnam and Mexico and Taiwan has picked up large chunks of what China is losing, but it's still not enough to offset entire China. And in the same token, the same U.S. imports from Mexico in 2018 has been increasing, and mainly is on electric and vehicle and auto parts. So this is an impact of NAFTA, where largely is likely is an American company set up shop in Mexico that is making the parts in the low cost region and then sending it back up to their US factories. Money supply impacted productivity growth. Gold to dollar. So when the dollar pegged to gold was stopped during Nixon era, I believe, and it gave the dollar unlimited but controlled amount to uh, fuel the capital to fuel the growth. Therefore, this I believe this change really lead to allowed globalization to happen and allow global economy to have the capital it needs to grow. And credit allows money supply capital to increase for future productivity efficiency. But this credit, if productivity doesn't improve and this investment doesn't get return, then the debt will increase continually, and I believe it will fuel inflation pressure. Capital further increase investment to support growth in innovation, and money supply critical to growth of economy like FDI, and globalizing allow FDI to come into these undeveloped countries. That impact to productivity. First is this is the debt trap is a debt trap. Yeah, I say the increase in the productivity goes to paying the debt. What I mean is continuing to you see the debt increases in the U.S. Um, if the productivity don't grow, the debt burden continues to grow, which prohibiting the future growth. Uh, so in the economic cycle, unless you if you don't pay back, so economy continues to grow without paying off the debt, then the bubble will form, and credit allows the spending to increase without the productivity increase. But if your productivity doesn't increase and the debt continue to grow, and then your economy, all the gains, or eventually even the non-gains, gains you had before will be forced to pay the debt, and then uh, productivity efficiency will decrease. And China, you see here the China debt ratio, debt to GDP ratio is not excessively compared to other nations. Japan is the highest, India somewhat lower, but they're in somewhere in the middle or lower level, similar to US. Um, AI impact on productivity. AI is innovation, so innovation is one of the critical part of driver of economic growth in solo and portal models. So AI, the technology by definition, should uh, improve the growth of economy and productivity. But I think it's difficult to measure or difficult to see at this point right now how AI would increase the demand of the goods or drive the efficiency of the productivity. Now, lagging productivity. This is another factor that I see that I haven't talked about is that why wage lag? I mean, I'm sorry, why productivity lag? And one of the reason I think is real wage have lagged behind productivity. So productivity had increased from 1990 to 2020 at this graph, this shows, but the real hourly wage have not really followed suit. In fact, it's decreasing. Uh, and I think this is why there's so much discomfort or discontent in the world right now. In starting to 1990s, I think it tracked very closely, but it kind of starting to diverge, flat, and then now negative. So I think you lose in the company, you lose the trust of the worker. And when you lose the trust of the worker by promising them good things, by if you work hard, but you don't come through on that promise. But corporate higher level management is benefiting through packages and bonuses way more than you. I think that I see in many cases in this kind of a corporate environment that productivity start lagging and people start leaving, changes start happening. So I think to improve the productivity, continue to improve the productivity, these real hourly wages has to go back up and support. And I think as the management can complain about overall costs, you're not being competitive. Um, I think we have to really look at the top management costs compared to the gap between that with the workers. This has to be this gap has to narrow a bit in order to make this more sense. Um, so I like to focus on the how to take care of the workers, employee wellness, communication, management practice, and tools and training to get get people, employees more productive. And by focusing on these, especially on employee wellness and the real hourly wages, if they improve the productivity, reward them accordingly. So uh, this is I think, one of the critical things that must be done in detail, in small level, and each companies and each places to gain productivity back. Foreign direct investment, I mentioned several times already. How important is the productivity with foreign direct investment? You can see the case of Ireland, increase in FDI, FDI increase in, you can see the increase in the GDP. So you need to attract, country needs to attract FDI, and what factors that attracts FDI is political stability, wage rate, tax rate, low wages, transportation, and infrastructure. So you can do business, size of the local market, or if it's globalization or linked market, then can be what your market is part of. Commodities, you have commodities to invest or use for the whatever you want to do. Access to free trade areas. So these are the factors that determine affecting FDI. But I say America really do not need FDI. I think, fortunately, America has a dollar as a currency of the last resort. Whole world uses dollar as this, and so, and due to U.S. Federal Reserve System, they can control the money supply, a U.S. dollar that globally being used, um, up or down. And so this is a tremendous advantage in U.S. of controlling and fueling their growth of GDP. Positive about protectionism, I think it strengthens the domestic economy by generating jobs and promoting locally made goods and products. Absence of competition from foreign imports allow for the government development of national industry, like there are more jobs, people are able to consume local goods. Protectionism allows for domestic industry grow and develop at a comfortable rate since they do not face competition and pressure from foreign markets. They have adequate room to grow at their own pace. Uh, it leads to the absence of dumping, the practice where the products are sold at much lower price than the cost of the production. So, yeah, true to the term protectionism, true to the word, it protects the local people and local industry, and it gives them time. So, but they need to use this time wisely and be aware of competitors globally, and they have to continue to push themselves to match the foreign competition. Negative impact of protectionism, additional costs, obviously. Um, they have manufacturers have freedom to increase the cost, improving without improving the quality. Limitation of range of goods, variety of the goods are really limited. Domestic industry and manufacture can become vulnerable, dependent on government support, because they didn't face the foreign competitor, which I mentioned a bit earlier. Uh, and political tension between two countries, just like U.S. and China, uh, is more likely without the trade, this economy link, easier to go to wars and fights. Once imposed, removing trade restriction be may prove to be detrimental to domestic industry as they become accustomed to these Yes. Is the local industry getting used to the protection, and they didn't foster or develop competitiveness in the global market. So once if you remove, they may lose the competition. And why USA need protectionism now? Because USA right now, middle American cannot afford standard of living. Um, Living in US for a long time and going back to US recently, the inflation unbearable. Largely is the healthcare costs is beyond already taken out a uh, lot of the salaries out of normal middle American people. Or lower class is receiving government free healthcare, government stipends. So they accepted that level, and but the higher class is getting richer and richer. So in this case, middle Americans are not happy, and so they need change and they need some protection against most of the industry they cannot compete with, like sub China. Um, so I say why, and they have to set up company. They meaning U.S. company have to set up manufacturing in other countries, outsource because they cannot compete in such cases. Energy, property costs, medical costs, legal costs, higher wages, higher taxes, government regulations and threat of unions, environmental requirement, lower productivity leads lower efficiency, low savings, high debt, capital drain to pay interest, capital drain through Wall Street investment for firms go to look for short-term capital gains. So under these circumstances, I do believe U.S. needs time of protection to reset their economy, reset their workforce, and uh, be make them competitive again. What is next? In my opinion, next 7 years, deglobalization is inevitable. U.S. will enter into protectionism to regain, and China will go through some deflation. I think they are, as a nation, overcapacitized in everything. So without U.S. market, they're really overcapacitated. So the supply is abundant because of the government policies. The people still need to work. They cannot lay off so freely. So they're gonna have to produce. So there will be more supply of goods available for the people. So there will be huge, I believe, huge deflation and pressure on the manufactured goods, but same or inflationary pressure on the food and the um, regular normal like food and dairy products because those are not manufactured and those are imports. Some of them, a lot of them are imports, which may deal with the tariff and maybe lower currency value. And perhaps the overall GDP will grow to 3% due to considering all this factor and protectionism. I believe the GDP still can grow to 3%. A lot of the debt that incurred by the government, local government, and the company that is not competitive and they're just overcapacitated must reduce and must close and clean up. Need to use this time to clean it up. And the Ukraine war will end, and then I think the supply will be more abundant, and a lot of the inflationary pressure, energy, and wheat and basic food will decrease. Inflation will be lowered, which were likely to be offset by the tariffs that China and U.S. will put on each other. So I don't foresee any further large increase in inflation. Um, but the inflation that already happened will stay. So in conclusion, I think we're going into the period of cultivation of differentiation of each nation. So I think there's a globalization, everybody being having a global standard and such and so on. But um, but I think it's a time to kind of each culture to recalibrate themselves and re re-look at and support the different things that they made them special. So uh, American can handle protectionism based on the trade balances and what they export or what they import. And one of the other data that I saw, largest one of the largest export was weaponry. So it really doesn't make sense that other nations they were reducing the export of weapons. I think is welcome. Control of global financial monetary system. USD is currency of last resort. So US has this the strength advantage that their economy will be stable even through the protectionism because US dollar is currency of last resort. Um, Freedom and creative and society attracts top talents around the world. So I believe that a country with gives freedom and creative society will attract top talents and foster innovation. So in in time of we are right now, I think the top talents will make more innovation and drive the uh, growth in the economy, their local economy. And another important factor is world-leading research and education facilities, strengthen natural resources and markets. So, an increased population health demographic through continued high level of immigration. Other country need of U.S. military for defense and capital. So if I explain this a little further, other country really rely on U.S. military defense and capital for their growth. So it, protectionism happens. Still, U.S. should be okay, but I think other country can be suffer because they need the U.S. dollar and the U.S. military for defense in order for them to grow, their own country to grow. So I think U.S. also can use this as a bargaining chip. um, I don't think there will be any risk of depression or recession. I think it's just is why right now we're just going through a normal death cycle, and you will recover. Risk of inflation exists, but it can be offset by reducing taxes and pay down government debt, reduction in trade deficit. And but long run, this protectionism cannot continue. Other countries will readjust. If they were if other country goes to that area, um, they will find different ways to, in the long run, to work with each other without U.S. to survive, and I believe they can. And also, the U.S. will become less competitive in the global setting. So U.S. need to work with them, but US need to buy short term, buy some time and recalibrate and make the US strong to be able to compete again. And I think overall, in the global sense, strong US, a strong US dollar uh, helps all the nations. So uh, weak US or weak US dollar, and if the US is not competitive, I don't think it benefits any countries. So yeah, that's it. That's my conclusion of my take on the world economy or situation right now. Okay, thank you.